There's a few hair shaders settings worth mentioning here. So let's just take a quick look. So on the first tab, we've got our basic color settings: ambient, diffuse, and tip colors. We have the ability to modulate the tip color balance, so between tip color A and B, as well as the actual crossover point going from the root to the tip. So in this case, we've got the center at 0.5 with a range of 1. So at halfway point of the hair, it'll transition to the tip or root color, and the range is 1. So over the full length of the hair, that transition will occur. Color variation. This is a really good way to add some realism to the hair. So you want to keep this usually quite high with hair. And it doesn't update in OGL, but in the render hairs it will. Probably one of the most important settings with hair is the specular. And if you have very dark hair, like black hair, you want to keep that quite high. You can see it has a shinier look. As we go down, it gets more matte and more dense looking. So with dark hair, you want a quite high specular. With lighter hair, less so, more of a dull look. And the transparency options. Usually here you want to keep the transparency pretty high and use a lot of hairs, and that basically allows light to transport to the volume of the hair, and it ends up looking more realistic. It also lightens the shadows a bit because you have the transparent hair, so that tends to give the hair a lighter, more realistic look. And like the root tip, we have a crossover control for the transparency. Indirect illumination tab, here we can control how sensitive the hair is to final gathering rays. So just like on the Fong shade or Lambert, we can modulate here how sensitive the hair is going to be to the final gathering. The last PPG has some specific render settings for hair. The shading model used. So normally for short hair like fur, a normal is computed at the root of the hair, and that normal is used to determine the shading along the full length of the hair. And that works fine if you've got short hair. With longer hair, you want to set this mode to long hair, and what that does is it computes the normal along the full length of the hair, and in this way you get a more realistic shading model built for the hair. The option for normal blending here, this is basically a way to modulate the shading on the hair. So normally when we render the hair with normal blending at 0, the hair is painted almost like a flat paint stroke. And this is ideal because it minimizes artifacts and it looks more realistic. Because essentially, if we were shading each hair very realistically when they're very small, it actually doesn't end up looking very realistic. So what you want to do is if you're doing close-ups of hair, you can bring the normal blending up. And as you get closer to hair, you'll notice that the hair is shaded. It fakes the shading so the hair looks more cylindrical across its whole circumference. And so oftentimes we have the camera moving from far away to close up. What you can do is animate the normal blending to ramp up as the camera gets closer and the hair looks more realistic. Or of course, if you're just doing a close-up of hair, increase the normal blending, and that'll give you a more realistic look. There's control for self-shadowing on the hair, so we can actually manage the density of the shadow there. BSP settings. For the volume shader, this is actually where you want to edit the BSP settings. If you're going to go with the geometry shader, it's actually on the hair primitive. So here you'll have the actual BSP settings for the geometry shader. Because we're in volume, they're grayed out. If we go here and switch to the geometry, you'll see they'll become enabled. So it's important to keep in mind the BSP settings for geometry versus volume are found in different spots for hair. So that's a quick look at the hair shaders.